Mungo Park was a Scottish explorer of West Africa. He was the first Westerner known to have travelled to the central portion of the Niger River. Early life. Mungo Park was born in Selkirkshire, Scotland, at Foul Shields on the Yarrow Water, near Selkirk, on a tenant farm which his father rented from the Duke of Buccleuch. He was the seventh in a family of 13. Although tenant farmers, the Parks were relatively well off. They were able to pay for Park to receive a good education, and Park's father died leaving property valued at £3,000. His parents had originally intended him for the church. He was educated at home before attending Selkirk Grammar School. At the age of 14, he was apprenticed to Thomas Anderson, a surgeon in Selkirk. During his apprenticeship, Park became friends with Anderson's son Alexander and was introduced to Anderson's daughter Alison, who would later become his wife. In October 1788, Park enrolled at the University of Edinburgh, attending for 4 sessions studying medicine and botany. Notably, during his time at university, he spent a year in the natural history course taught by Professor John Walker. After completing his studies, he spent a summer in the Scottish Highlands, engaged in botanical fieldwork with his brother-in-law, James Dixon, a gardener and seed merchant in Covent Garden. In 1788, Dixon and Sir Joseph Banks had founded the London Linnean Society. In 1791, Park completed his medical studies at University of Edinburgh. Through a recommendation by Banks, he obtained the post of assistant surgeon on board the East India Company's ship Worcester. In February 1793, the Worcester sailed to Bencoolen in Sumatra. Before departing, Park wrote his friend Alexander Anderson Indiana terms that reflect his Calvinist upbringing. My hope is now approaching to a certainty. If I be deceived, may God alone put me right, for I would rather die in the delusion than wake to all the joys of earth. May the Holy Spirit dwell in your heart, my dear friend, and if I ever see my native land again, may I rather see the green sod on your grave than see you anything but a Christian. On his return in 1794, Park gave a lecture to the Linnean Society, describing 8 new Sumatran fish. The paper was not published until 3 years later. He also presented Banks with various rare Sumatran plants. First journey. On the 26th of September 1794, Mungo Park offered his services to the African Association, then looking for a successor to Major Daniel Houghton, who had been sent in 1790 to discover the course of the Niger River and had died in the Sahara. Supported by Sir Joseph Banks, Park was selected. On the 22nd of May 1795, Park left Portsmouth, England, on the brig Endeavour, a vessel trading to the Gambia for beeswax and ivory. On the 21st of June 1795, he reached the Gambia River and ascended it 200 miles to a British trading station named Pisania. On the 2nd of December, accompanied by 2 local guides, he started for the unknown interior. He chose the route crossing the upper Senegal basin and through the semi-desert region of Kaarta. The journey was full of difficulties, and at Ludema he was imprisoned by a Moorish chief for 4 months. On the 1st of July 1796, he escaped, alone and with nothing but his horse and a pocket compass, and on the 21st reached the long-sought Niger River at Ségou. Being the first European to do so, he followed the river downstream 80 miles to Silla, where he was obliged to turn back, lacking the resources to go further. On his return journey, begun on the 29th of July, he took a route more to the south than that originally followed, keeping close to the Niger River as far as Bamako, thus tracing its course for some 300 miles. At Kamalia he fell ill, and owed his life received the kindness of a man in whose house he lived for 7 months. Eventually he reached Pisania again on the 10th of June 1797, returning to Scotland by way of Antigua on the 22nd of December. He had been thought dead, and his return home with news of the discovery of the Niger River evoked great public enthusiasm. An account of his journey was drawn up for the African Association by Brian Edwards, and his own detailed narrative appeared in 1799. Park was convinced that, whatever difference there is between the Negro and European in the conformation of the nose and the color of the skin, there is none in the genuine sympathies and characteristic feelings of our common nature. Park encountered a group of slaves when traveling through Mandinka country, Mali. They were all very inquisitive, but they viewed me at first with looks of horror, and repeatedly asked if my countrymen were cannibals. They were very desirous to know what became of the slaves after they had crossed the salt water. I told them that they were employed in cultivating the land, but they would not believe me. A deeply rooted idea that the whites purchase Negroes for the purpose of devouring them, or of selling them to others that they may be devoured hereafter, naturally makes the slaves contemplate a journey towards the coast with great terror, insomuch that the slaves are forced to keep them constantly in irons, and watch them very closely, to prevent their escape. His book Travels in the Interior Districts of Africa was a success because it detailed what he observed, what he survived, and the people he encountered. His honest descriptions set a standard for future travel writers to follow. This gave Europeans a glimpse of what Africa was really like. Park introduced them to a vast, unexplored continent. After his death, public and political interest in Africa began to increase. He had proved that Africa could be explored. Perhaps the most lasting effect of Park's travels, though, was their influence on European governments. Between journeys, settling at Fell Shields, in August 1799, Park married Alison, daughter of his old master, Thomas Anderson. A project to go to New South Wales in some official capacity came to nothing, and in October 1801 Park moved to Peebles, where he practiced as a physician. Second journey. In the autumn of 1803, Mungo Park was invited by the government to lead another expedition to the Niger. Park, who chafed at the hardness and monotony of life at Peebles, accepted the offer, but the expedition was delayed. Part of the waiting time was occupied perfecting his Arabic, his teacher being Sidi Ambak Bubi, a native of Mogador, whose behavior both amused and alarmed the people of Peebles. In May 1804, Park went back to Fell Shields, where he made the acquaintance of Sir Walter Scott, then living nearby at Ashiestale, with whom he soon became friendly. In September, Park was summoned to London to leave on the new expedition. He left Scott with the hopeful proverb on his lips, "Fates follow those that look to them." Park had at that time adopted the theory that the Niger and the Congo were one, and in a memorandum drawn up before he left Britain he wrote, "My hopes of returning by the Congo are not altogether fanciful." On the 31st of January 1805 he sailed from Portsmouth for Gambia, having been given a captain's commission as head of the government expedition. Alexander Anderson, his brother-in-law and second-in-command, had received a lieutenancy. George Scott, a fellow boarder, was draftsman, and the party included 4 or 5 artificers. At Gorée, Park was joined by Lieutenant Martin R.A., 35 privates and 2 seamen. The expedition did not reach the Niger until mid-August, when only 11 Europeans were left alive. The rest had succumbed to fever or dysentery. From Bamako the journey to Ségou was made by canoe. Having received permission from the local ruler, Mansong Diarra, to proceed, at Sansanding, a little below Ségou, Park made ready for his journey down the still unknown part of the river, helped by 1 soldier, the only one capable of work. Park converted 2 canoes into one tolerably good boat, 40 feet long and 6 feet broad. This he christened HM Schooner Joliba, and in it, with the surviving members of his party, he set sail downstream on the 19th of November. Anderson had died at Sandstanding on the 28th of October, and in him Park had lost the only member of the party, except Scott, already dead, who had been of real use. Those who were embarked in the Joliba were Park, Martin, 3 European soldiers, a guide and 3 slaves. Before his departure, Park gave to Isaac-O, a Mandingo guide who had been with him thus far, letters to take back to Gambia for transmission to Britain. The spirit with which Park began the final stage of his enterprise is well illustrated by his letter to the head of the Colonial Office. "I shall," he wrote, "set sail for the East with the fixed resolution to discover the termination of the Niger or perish in the attempt. Though all the Europeans who are with me should die, and though I were myself half dead, I would still persevere, and if I could not succeed in the object of my journey, I would at least die on the Niger." To his wife, Park wrote of his intention not to stop nor land anywhere until he reached the coast, where he expected to arrive about the end of January 1806. These were the last communications received from Park, and nothing more was heard of the party until reports of disaster reached Gambia. Death at length. The British government engaged Isaac-O to go to the Niger to ascertain Park's fate. At Sandstanding, Isaac-O found Amadi Fatuma, the guide who had gone downstream with Park, and the substantial accuracy of the story he told was later confirmed by the investigations of Hugh Clapperton and Richard Lander. Amadi Fatuma stated that Park's canoe had descended the river as far as Sibi without incident. After Sibi, 3 canoes chased them and Park's party repulsed them with firearms. A similar incident occurred at Cabra and again at Tumbuktu. At Gurumo, 7 canoes pursued them. One of the party died of sickness, leaving 4 white men, myself, and 3 slaves. Each person had 15 muskets apiece, well loaded and always ready for action. After passing the residence of the king of Goluijiji, 60 canoes came after them, which they repulsed after killing many natives. Further along they encountered an army of the Pool Nation and kept to the opposite bank to avoid an action. After a close encounter with the hippopotamus, they continued past Kafo to an island where Isaac-O was taken prisoner. Park rescued him, and 20 canoes chased them. This time they merely asked Amadi for trinkets which Park supplied. At Gurmin they traded for provisions and were warned of an ambush up ahead. They passed the army, being all Moors, and entered Haorsa, finally arriving at Yari, where he landed. In this long journey of some 1,000 miles, Park, who had plenty of provisions, stuck to his resolution of keeping aloof from the natives. Below Janet came Timbuktu, and at various other places the natives came out in canoes and attacked his boat. These attacks were all repulsed, Park and his party having plenty of firearms and ammunition and the natives having none. The boat also escaped the many perils attendant on navigating an unknown stream strewn with many rapids. Park had built Joliba so that she drew only 1 foot of water. At Haorsa, Amadi traded with the local chief. Amadi reports that Park gave him 5 silver rings, some powder and flints to give as a gift to the chief of the village. The following day Amadi visited the king, where Amadi was accused of not having given the chief a present. Amadi was put in irons. The king then sent an army to Borsa, where there is a natural narrowing of the river commanded by high rock. but at the Bussa Rapids, not far below Yari, the boat became stuck on a rock and remained fast. On the bank were gathered hostile natives, who attacked the party with bow and arrow and throwing spears. The position being untenable, Park, Martin and the two remaining soldiers sprang into the river and were drowned. The sole survivor was one of the slaves. After 3 months in irons, Amadi was released and talked with the surviving slave, from whom was obtained the story of the final scene. Aftermath: Amadi paid a Pule man to obtain Park's sword belt. Amadi then returned first to Sansanding and then to Sago. Amadi then went to Dacha and told the king what had passed. The king sent an army past Tomboa Kautus to Sasha, but decided that Haorsa was too far for a punitive expedition. Instead they went to Masina, a small Pule country, where they took all the cattle and returned home. Amadi appears to have been part of this expedition. We came all together back to Sego. Amadi then returned to Sansanding via Sego. Eventually the Pule man obtained the sword belt and after a voyage of 8 months met up with Amadi and gave him the belt. Isako met Amadi in Sego and having obtained the sword belt returned to Senegal. Isako, and later Richard Lander, obtained some of Park's effects, but his journal was never recovered. In 1827 his second son, Thomas, landed on the Guinea coast, intending to make his way to Bussa, where he thought his father might be detained a prisoner, but after penetrating a little distance inland he died of fever. Park's widow, Alison, received a previously agreed upon £4,000 settlement from the African Association as a result of the death of Mungo Park. She died in 1840. Mungo Park's remains are believed to have been buried along the banks of the River Niger in Jebba, Nigeria. Medal: the Royal Scottish Geographical Society award the Mungo Park Medal annually in Park's honour. Works: Park Mungo. Descriptions of 8 new fishes from Sumatra. Read 4th of November 1794. Transactions of the Linnean Society, 333-38. DOI 10.1111 J 1096-3642.1797 TB00553X. Park Mungo. Travels in the interior districts of Africa, performed under the direction and patronage of the African Association in the years 1795, 1796, and 1797. London, W. Bulmer and Company. Park Mungo. The Journal of a Mission to the Interior of Africa in the year 1805, together with other documents, official and private, relating to the same mission, to which is prefixed an account of the life of Mr. Park. London, John Murray. Park Mungo. Travels in the interior districts of Africa, performed in the years 1795, 1796, and 1797. London, John Murray. Google, Volume 1, Volume 2.